Back in 1995, Val Kilmer was taking over Hollywood. With memorable performances in Top Gun, The Doors, and Tombstone already under his belt, he really cemented himself as the young actor in the industry by teaming up with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino in Heat. And that same year, he donned the cape in Batman Forever. Fast forward a mere decade and he's starring almost exclusively in direct-to-DVD films, making him one of the quickest falls from grace in that era. But why? In 2021, a documentary dropped shedding light on Kilmer's life, his love for acting, and the recent battle with losing his voice to cancer. However, the documentary skimmed over a controversial part of his career, the time that he was labeled as a prima donna. So we wanted to take a deeper look at this part of his career, like the reason for him never returning as Batman, or one of the most infamous movie productions ever and the final nail in the coffin that had Hollywood turning its back on him. First things first though, let's quickly run through how Val Kilmer rose to fame. Born in LA in 1959, Kilmer grew up with an older and younger brother, and from the get-go, Kilmer had this thing for acting. He and his younger brother Wesley created short remakes of hit movies with Wesley directing. Kilmer's passion for acting continued throughout the years, and he snagged a spot at Juilliard's drama division, becoming the youngest person to be accepted. But life dealt a harsh blow in 1977 when Wesley, at just 15, drowned in a jacuzzi after an epileptic seizure. This event hit Kilmer hard, especially because Wesley was his partner in crime for his acting passion. At Juilliard, he helped start a playwriting program, wrote a play, and starred in various productions. In 1983, he stepped up his theater game with Slab Boys, sharing the stage with Kevin Bacon and Sean Penn. He acted in his first film a year later as the lead in Top Secret, a goofy spy spoof where he also sang all the songs himself and even dropped an album under the character's name. And the year after, he starred in another comedy, Real Genius. Then came 1986 and Top Gun, putting Kilmer on everyone's radar as Iceman, Tom Cruise's on-screen rival. Fun fact, Kilmer initially disliked the script, thinking it was a bit silly and he wasn't keen on doing a film about war, yet contractual ties dragged him in. Off camera, he and Cruise had their own behind-the-scenes rivalry, complete with entourages. But Kilmer brushed it off as a way to just help build their characters. Top Gun ended up soaring at the box office. 1988 saw Kilmer star in Willow, where he met his future wife Joanne Whalley, who later played a pivotal role in the collapse of his career. But despite the Top Gun career boost, Kilmer hustled hard for his next big film. He made his own audition tapes, going all out for roles in Full Metal Jacket and Goodfellas, which he didn't get. He even hand-delivered the Full Metal Jacket tapes. His next breakthrough finally arrived in 1991 with The Doors, where he played singer Jim Morrison. Kilmer's audition tapes mimicking Morrison's voice through different stages of his life didn't impress director Oliver Stone, but The Doors' original producer was sold. To prep, Kilmer went all in, morphing into Morrison almost a year before shooting, which included dressing the part, chilling at Morrison's hangouts, and immersing himself in everything Morrison made. He spent 6 months rehearsing the songs every day. It got to the point where after the film, he sought psychiatric help to get the Jim out of his head. The end result had Kilmer doing his own singing, and his behavior was uncanny to the real Morrison.
If I was to say to you.
Despite mixed reviews for the film, Kilmer's acting earned him applause and showed he was more than just a pretty face. He then starred in these few films, including one of his most beloved performances as Doc Holliday in Tombstone. By this point in his career, there wasn't much public news about Kilmer's on-set issues. Tombstone's producer said he behaved well and would love to work with him again, yet whispers of Kilmer's stormy behavior began circulating. The first director of Tombstone dropped a weird story saying, "There's a dark side to Val that I don't feel comfortable talking about." He said he was sitting with Kilmer, discussing the character while a stand-in came in to show a colorful sort of locust, to which Kilmer grabbed it and ate it, saying, "As you know, I have a reputation for being difficult, but only with stupid people." His antics on his next few films didn't just raise eyebrows, they completely tarnished his reputation in Hollywood. Many argue that it's not his behavior that went off the rails, but that more people just started paying attention. The lead up to Batman Forever did drop some hints though. Remember that competitiveness with Tom Cruise in Top Gun? Kilmer chalked it up to method acting, but he could have said that just to save face. Then, during the Doors production, a memo surfaced listing Kilmer's on-set do's and don'ts, including not approaching him unless necessary. Director Oliver Stone dug into it, and Kilmer explained that it was just for his people, not the crew. Stone did note Kilmer's intensity, saying he's passionate about his work. Approach wrong, you'll see a side you don't like. This is a trend we'll soon see, especially with directors who can't keep up. By 1994, Kilmer was pulling in $6 million per film. The cash started to get to his head, cranking up the prima donna behavior. Snagging the role of Batman in Batman Forever was his dream gig. He signed on without looking at the script or the director. Joel Schumacher was at the helm, and he'd heard the horror stories. Don't hire Val, they warned him. Schumacher rolled the dice, but oh boy, he was in for one of his roughest productions. At this point, Kilmer was knee-deep in a nasty divorce with his wife Joanne Whalley, who he married back in 1988. They had 2 kids and were dealing with custody battles and arguing over assets until officially divorcing in 1996. But the years leading up to it were rough on Kilmer that only intensified his on-set antics. Many actually blame the divorce for the most notorious period of his career. On the set of Batman Forever, Kilmer and Schumacher really butted heads. They even had a physical pushing match because Kilmer was being irrational and ballistic with the first assistant director, the cameraman, and the costume people. He was badly behaved, he was rude, and inappropriate. Schumacher labeled him childish and impossible. After one particularly heated argument, they didn't exchange words for 2 weeks. A blissful 2 weeks for Schumacher. Add Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey's conflicts into the mix, and Schumacher was ready to call it quits. After filming wrapped up, he said, "I'm tired of defending overpaid, overprivileged actors. I pray I don't work with them again," referring to Kilmer and Jones. Batman Forever hit the screen with meh reviews but solid box office numbers. Kilmer's performance? People were pretty split on it, and to no surprise, he didn't come back for the sequel. Schumacher summed it up. "He sort of quit, we sort of fired him. It probably depends on who's telling the story." In 1996, Kilmer starred in The Island of Dr. Moreau, which had one of the wildest productions ever, with Kilmer and Marlon Brando in a contest to see who could waste more time. Kilmer swooped in to replace Bruce Willis, and right off the bat caused issues by wanting to slash his required days on set by a whopping 40%. Director Richard Stanley wasn't thrilled but had to play nice since, as the studio put it, Val was the money, and Stanley could easily be dropped before they even touched Kilmer. So he handed Kilmer the smaller role of Montgomery. During the shoot, Kilmer couldn't be bothered to say his lines properly, threw in bizarre wardrobe requests, and casually strolled in on the second day at 3 p.m. Kilmer's agent told Stanley not to worry because every Val movie loses the first 2 days. Many claim that Kilmer was a bit of a bully on set and very hostile the first few days, constantly picking on Stanley's ideas. Stanley summed it up saying, "Val would arrive and an argument would happen." Things got even crazier with an incident where Kilmer supposedly burned a cameraman's face with a cigarette. Some called it playful, but others insisted it was intentional and on the guy's face, not just the sideburn as the film's producer claims. Brando, who was fond of Stanley, arrived to the production when it was too late. Unable to control Kilmer and crumbling under studio pressure, Stanley got the boot and was replaced by John Frankenheimer. New Line's producer took the blame, admitting, "I didn't give Kilmer a strong director, and that was my fault." Well, the experience with Frankenheimer didn't bring much relief. When Frankenheimer stepped in, the film was already out of control, eventually reaching the point where Brando wearing an ice bucket on his head got the green light. And speaking of Brando, he and Kilmer weren't exactly the best of friends. Brando apparently moved his trailer far away from Kilmer's and was one-upping Kilmer's delays to the point where they didn't shoot for 12 days, with the cast and crew just standing around waiting for the actors. Brando was overheard telling Kilmer, "Your problem is you confuse the size of your paycheck with the size of your talent." Very on the nose with Kilmer's next decade of film productions. Kilmer denied any beef with Brando, showing a few friendly behind-the-scenes moments in his documentary, but others told a different story. Frankenheimer's experience with Kilmer was even worse, to the point where after filming Kilmer's final scene, he shouted, "Cut, now get the bastard off my set." Their clashes were frequent, and even in the Val documentary, you can catch Kilmer antagonizing Frankenheimer, who's just trying to wrap up this film disaster.
"I'm in a highly emotional state because you said earlier to David and I you're going to leave this movie."
After the film hit theaters, Frankenheimer declared, "There are 2 things I will never do in my life. I will never climb Mount Everest, and I will never work with Val Kilmer again. There isn't enough money in the world." No surprises here, the movie tanked, earned Kilmer his first Razzie nod, and his on-set antics became very public. Somehow, he even out-prima donna'd Brando on this crazy production. At Brando's wrap party, one of the animal extras took off its mask to reveal that it was the old director, Stanley, who had been watching the production this whole time. Some people blamed Stanley's erratic behavior for his dismissal, and the unmasking moment definitely added some weight to that. But Kilmer, in a shocking turn of events, hugged Stanley and apologized for what happened before. In that same year, Kilmer starred in The Ghost in the Darkness with Michael Douglas and brought his self-centered attitude along for the ride. The writer, William Goldman, heard Douglas giving Kilmer a reality check, warning him that he could end up with a career like Eric Roberts or Mickey Rourke if he didn't straighten up. The film released to mediocre reviews and box office numbers. The next year, he starred in The Saint, bringing a bit more of that challenging behavior with him. It did well at the box office, but critics weren't a fan of it, and Kilmer snagged his second Razzie nod. He also lent his voice to The Prince of Egypt in 1997, followed by another big flop in 1999 with At First Sight. Kilmer's ability for pulling in crowds was beginning to wear thin, and if you can't bring in money for a film, then they'll begin to lose their patience with you. Kilmer had a lot riding on 2000's Red Planet, whether he knew it or not. Despite his well-earned reputation for being difficult, he somehow snagged the lead in this $80 million film. Kilmer kept up his shenanigans, this time having issues with co-star Tom Sizemore, who he worked with before in Heat. Trouble started brewing when the production dropped a lot of money to ship Sizemore elliptical machine to the Australian set. Verbal tension between the two reached a boiling point, with Kilmer shouting, "I'm making $10 million on this, you're only making too. And Sizemore apparently tossed a weight at Kilmer after hearing this. And when Sizemore was gearing up for a punch, the producer asked him to steer clear of the face. So Sizemore went for the chest instead. The co-director of Kilmer's documentary confirmed that there were 200 hours of footage recorded during this film, but they didn't use any of this footage in the documentary to not shed any new light on these issues. And this was one of the big issues I had with the documentary. I knew about these kinds of stories going into it and watched it in hopes of finding out more about them, only to see that they really glossed over them. Red Planet hit the screens with critics panning it, and it being a box office disaster, but hey, at least the two actors have patched things up since then. Red Planet marked the end of Kilmer's run as a major film lead. The films that followed were a series of flops, with a taste of direct-to-DVD action in 2002's Hard Cash. In 2004, Kilmer's infamous behavior took the spotlight again with Spartan, where he clashed with the director and didn't hold back on the DVD commentary where he spent a lot of time roasting him. The same year, he took on the high-budget Alexander, which flopped hard and gave him another Razzie nod, and he had one last shot at comedy with 2005's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Despite stellar reviews, the film tanked at the box office and Kilmer made a shift to almost exclusively starring in straight-to-DVD movies. But it's a bit unfair to box him into the direct-to-DVD category since he still snagged some minor role in more popular films since Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. In 2010, he even developed and performed in a one-man show called Citizen Twain, where he played Mark Twain and garnered positive reviews, eventually turning it into a tour. While touring in 2015, he lost his voice and started coughing blood. Rushed to the hospital, he got the news that he had throat cancer. He kept his health struggles under wraps until 2017, revealing that after a 2-year battle, he had triumphed. To beat cancer, he was given a tracheostomy, a hole in his throat for breathing, which made speaking a challenge. The documentary Val goes over the struggles he's been dealing with, and we also saw him in Top Gun Maverick struggling to speak where they digitally altered his voice to make it sound clearer.
Who's the better pilot?
But despite the sad end to his career, did Kilmer deserve Hollywood's cold shoulder in the first place? Sure, there's a long list of diva-like incidents, but there are just as many people who have praised him. Everyone enjoyed their time with him on the set of Heat, and even Irwin Winkler, the director of At First Sight, who was initially skeptical, found working with Kilmer to be a wonderful experience. Mira Sorvino, Kilmer's co-star in At First Sight, had nothing but positive things to say about him, calling him professional, gentlemanly, and a terrific actor. Jeffrey Katzenberg, the producer of Prince of Egypt, called Kilmer patient, understanding, and phenomenally generous with his time. And Robert Downey Jr. only had admiration for Kilmer during their production in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Between 1993 and 2005, working with Kilmer was a bit of a coin flip, but the quality of director seemed to play a big role. In 2004, Kilmer defended himself saying, "If I'm demanding, which I don't think I am overly, it's for the good of the picture." His passion for acting might have inadvertently ruffled feathers, and as his salary and ego inflated, he may have ventured too far out of bounds. Combine this with the messy divorce during some of his toughest years, and it's hard to label his career's collapse as anything but unfortunate. When watching the documentary, Kilmer seemed like a genuinely nice guy, even a bit goofy at times. Under directors who could control him, he could have potentially blossomed into something huge given his undeniable talent. And the career he still had is nothing to scoff at. So there you have it, the time when Hollywood turned its back on Val Kilmer. What do you think of his career? Do you think he deserved all the public backlash? Share your thoughts below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe and check out our Patreon for some cool perks. But until next time, have a good one.